Hi, and welcome back to Dogs Do Speak podcast with myself, Connie Spence, and the wonderful Samantha Wayland. And today we have a wonderful guest in Holly Leake. Now, most of you will probably know Holly through various other organisations. We will let Holly Leake explain who she is in a little while. But once again, welcome back to Dogs Do Speak. Please hit that subscribe button so you do not lose out on any of the content we put up in the future. And I just want to say thank you to everyone that's, subscribed to the channel. It's looking good. Please keep up the good work and thank you very much. Holly, welcome to Dogs Do Speak. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Colin. Thank you for having me.
It would be a stupid no-brainer not to have you on, yeah? Because as far as I'm concerned, you're very well respected and a very dear friend, and equally importantly, you know your stuff. Okay. So, Holly, can you just tell those that are listening, watching, uh, how did you get into the business? Who is Holly?
I started as a dog walker, so I didn't even have my own dog at the time, just because I was newly married and lived in a flat, didn't have the ideal home for to have a dog really, um, and I had a few health struggles back then, so I started a bit of dog walking alongside a bit of cleaning, and that's why my business is called Poor Chores. Because at the time I didn't know where it was going to go, and I just thought I'll offer a bit of both. Go into houses where there is dogs because I've been raised with dogs and I'm confident with them. I can do a bit of cleaning, and then if they want the dog, let out or taken for a walk, I can do that as well. And that's kind of how it started. And then I had a lot of dogs that were really reactive, and so my my sort of instinct was I really want to help these dogs, and the guardians would say like, "Oh, what do we do?" And I'd have to be honest and say, I'm really sorry, but I'm not quite sure. But I'm going to go away and try and get some research and try and see if I can help. And they'd give me suggestions and they wouldn't work. And sometimes they'd have aversives, which I didn't like. And I'd take them off when I went on the walk and then put it back on just before I give the dog back. Because even back then, I had a horrible gut feeling about it. And then I actually enrolled with a college that I'm not proud of, that I wouldn't study with now. Um, the course itself was good, but then it was very, very much of use what works. So I got a good foundation, but I didn't like that they would use a balanced approach. So then I started studying with canine principles, which matched my ethics. And so from there on, I developed my business more, went into dog training, took on my own team members so that they could do the dog walking and that I could focus on the training side. And unfortunately, I was hired as a tutor for canine principals, and then ISCP, which is great. And then from then on, I'm now a behaviour consultant with Companion Animal Wellness, which is Junior Hudson from Heal the Dog. So I get to work with dogs all the way across the UK now via virtual consultations, which is giving me a very, very broad range of behaviour cases. And it's very much to throw you in the deep end, but it's brilliant for experience. So I've gone very much from dog walker to trainer to tutor to behaviour consultant, and I'm still sort of doing all of it. So I get to enjoy lots of different aspects in the dog industry.
You find the time, Holly.
Everyone asks me that.
You've got more hours than I have, certainly. Longer days.
It's spinning plates all the time, trying to juggle everything. When the business runs smoothly and the team are all, at work and everything's great, runs fine. When one of them's sick or the car breaks down or on holiday, then it's chaos because then I've got to try and manage the business even more. It's a bit harder, obviously, with the hot weather as well because I've got to be in constant contact with them and change bookings. But when it runs smoothly, I can manage it and sort of focus on my behaviour cases and the tutoring side, which is sort of my passion at the moment.
Okay, well, that's a really good background and how you got into, the dog training industry, whatever we want to call it. That's a lot of good stuff there. Dog walking, I'm finding now that a lot of trainers, new trainers, that's where they started, dog walking. I couldn't do that. That's too much hard work. I couldn't do it. I've got to be honest. I don't like hard work. I don't. Especially when you've got to get up, you open the door and it's peeing down the rain and there's thunderstorms. I'm so blessed that I work with my dogs from a very young age. And when we open the door and we see this happening, we all look at each other and we agree to close the door. It has worked so far. It has worked. But
See,
then, Holly,
funnily, I started exactly the same as you, Holly, with the walking and cleaning as a joint business. I did exactly the same thing, bizarrely. And I've never heard anyone else who's mixed the two before. But for me, which is probably the same as you, there were so many houses where other people wouldn't go into because there was dogs. And then when you were there, you were letting them out anyway. And they were like, oh, come back. So yeah, I did started in the same way. So yeah.
That's interesting.
that is interesting, actually.
I've never heard anyone else who started with such a weird mixture before.
Well, maybe after they have watched this podcast, then the
They'll
thousands
be
have
doing it.
in the country. Okay, so Holly, today we're looking and talking about, look to talk about adolescence. And it's a very popular topic, subject across the industry, yeah? But not everyone totally understands what it actually is. So for any of our dog owners, dog guardians, and even trainers, if they're not quite sure when we're talking about adolescence, what is adolescence, Holly, and what does that look like?
So, adolescence is a necessary development stage, typically between the ages of 6 and 24 months. Although we have found now that in some breeds, the development is a lot longer, sort of up to 3 years for brain development. And during that adolescent period, you've obviously got puberty as well, but they are separate processes. So, they're used interchangeably, puberty and adolescence, but actually puberty is your sexual maturity. Adolescence is more your behavioral maturity. And obviously in that you're going to have your physical development as well. The joints are going to get stronger, the skull's going to get bigger, the brain's going to get bigger. There are a lot of neurological and hormonal changes that are occurring. Obviously, in males, you're going to have that increase in testosterone. Females, you're going to have that heat cycle. Um, but it is a necessary development stage, and a very, very challenging one, and one that not a lot of people are expecting. They have a puppy, and I warn them about the changes that they'll experience after the puppy's going sort of into that adolescent stage. And they're like, oh, but got such a good temperament, and they feel like they've got a very, very stable personality there. And they're very, very sure, no matter how many times I warn them, they're so sure. And I'm like, just wait for it, because I've seen it with so many dogs, including my own, that the changes were overnight, like a switch, and it was huge. But it's important for people to understand is it's a necessary part of them developing into an adult. And the fact that dogs still have adolescence just shows that despite artificial selection, and despite domestication, they still have this adolescent stage, showing that it's on an evolutionary basis, it is necessary. Whether the survival mechanisms behind it may be very, very different, but they need to have that in order for them to develop into a stable, confident adult.
Yeah, I suppose it's very similar to humans, really. We are children, we go into our teenager years, where there are lots of changes. So, yeah, I personally don't think it's going to be much different for dogs. But you mentioned the changes. Could you give us sort of like an outlook of what a change could look like, what one of those changes could be?
So there are so many.
Mhm.
Um, with males and females, we can see a very, very big decline in engagement and relationship. So this is called adolescence phase conflict. And there was an amazing study done. I think it's Asher, that was done in 2020, I think it was. And it showed that they used assistance dogs, and they realized that after that 6 month period, even with assistance dogs that had had so much training, that there was a decline in engagement to a basic cue such as sit.
Okay.
But when they had a stranger walk in and ask the same cue, they responded straight away, showing they knew how to respond, but there was a decline in their engagement with their own caregiver. And that's obviously something that we see in human teenage relationships where they won't listen to their parents very well, but they will necessarily, they might listen to another adult, another trusted adult. So there is a huge decline in relationship and communication because they are naturally trying to be more independent. And so that has ramifications on all training, whether that be recall or, obedience in the house. And so that decline in the relationship, that communication doesn't necessarily mean there's a bad relationship, there's no abuse happening, but the dog's not listening. And so they're asking them, like, this, you've done this since you were a puppy and now you're not doing it. And then somebody else comes along and the dog does it. And I have this with my own training clients. They'll ask the dog to do something, they won't do it, and I go over and I do it, and they think I'm magic. And I have to say, no, 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 it's not. It's nothing. I'm not magical. It's just literally this adolescence phase conflict whereby they are more likely to listen to a stranger than their own caregiver because of this development stage. And I know it's frustrating, but it is part of that development stage. And that's going to have ramifications on all your dog's behavior. Worse in some areas than others, depending on the individual dog. But we're going to see a decline, particularly recall is one of the big ones. But we might see things like anxiety and resource guarding reactivity also develop.
Yeah, I totally understand when you say, dogs are not going to respond, don't respond to their owners, but the new person, yeah, that novel person, the novelty of that new person coming over, I'm ready to listen now. I'm ready to focus and give you my attention. What have you got to offer me? I totally get that. Yeah. And it's quite sad sometimes when we look at the clients, their faces, and exactly they think, well, I won't call myself God, but look at you and call yourself the queen, yeah, or the goddess. I totally get that. So I mean, does is there a stage, and you sort of touched on it earlier on, through puppyhood? Let's just go from the 15 to 16 weeks of age mark. Is there anything we can do there to help the adolescent stage for the future?
Well, there is a study that shows that puppies that have attended puppy classes are typically have better adolescence. And they found that didn't matter what time that was, as long as it was before 6 months of age. So if people are attending reward-based puppy classes or a form of puppy training, that seems to reduce the struggles faced with behavioural issues. And there's also obviously a correlation with the fact that those attending classes are more likely to use reward-based training. They're less likely to turn to aversives, which does increase, the use of aversives does increase in adolescence for a lot of people. So I think there's a correlation there that if you've gone to puppy classes, there's going to be um, better management of behaviours during adolescence, but more likely to use reward-based methods, which is going to be more successful in adolescence as well. So I think there's definitely a very strong connection there between the two.
That is so, so important what you just said, actually, because it keeps coming back to 4-3 science-based, scientific approach, where we're using 4-3, yeah, methods, because conflict with a youngster is not going to work if we are, what's the word, overzealous, heavy-handed, heavy vocabulary. So I totally, totally get that. So classes can help. I suppose also, Holly, would you agree or disagree that the fact that dogs are in classes, puppies are in classes, and they are used to the environment having other dogs on board within it, and the fact that there is positive training going on at the same time allows them to start being able to have that background of dogs, be comfortable with that background of dogs, but also do whatever it is activity they're working on in the class. Is that what you sort of mean?
Yeah, so there's definitely an improvement. It's not going to stop those adolescent
Hmm.
behaviours. My dog's a good example because I used to teach classes, and he would come with me several times a week, and he was brilliant. I used to use him as a demo dog, and he was great. And then he hit around 7 to 8 months, and then he started cocking his leg, and I thought, oh, we're getting a bit of a testosterone spike. And then he was the most moany, whiny, tantrum dog you could see. My husband had to sort of take him out of the class, and he'd like slide across the floor like a mop. because he just thrown himself on the floor because all he wanted to do then was socialize. And we do have, sort of hypersocial behaviors. So yes, there's definitely an improvement in behaviors in puppy classes, provided those classes aren't just puppy parties, they are focusing around dogs, but we can still see that they do become more interested in dogs after that time, and they'll still will experience, a regression and recall, and other behaviors. But yes, there is definitely an improvement, and I think guardians are better prepared for the changes. So maybe some dogs there's no difference in how bad those changes are, but maybe the guardian's perception of those changes is better because they're better prepared. They know the influence of reward-based training versus aversive training, and so they have a better mindset. And I think the guardian's attitude is so crucial to how a dog is going to be able to develop through adolescence, because if they're not prepared for it, a very, very big percentage of those dogs are going to end up in a rescue.
Yeah, that's where I was sort of going to jump in as well. 'Cause we find, obviously, I work primarily with rescue dogs, and we definitely see, and I'm experiencing it at the minute with two, that were adopted as these cute little fluffy puppies, so cute. They go off to their homes. We lower those expectations we have them, but when adolescent hits and they've got this big, stronger, gangly, rebellious adolescent shepherd mix, that's when they then go, oh, actually, this is quite hard. Here you go back to the rescue. How do we meet those? How do we lower those expectations enough or set them up? Apart from the puppy classes, which, like you said, the ones that you were talking about sound brilliant. Is there anything else that we can do to sort of help those guardians or those adopters prepare a bit more for the reality of this bigger, stronger, rebellious dog?
This is something that I was talking to Joe Middleton about, because I'm designing a course for adolescents, for dog professionals, so that we can try and educate the public a bit more, because adolescent dogs are more at risk of being in a shelter, and they're actually more at risk of about 30, I think it's 30, around 30% of adolescent dogs have failed adoptions as well. So
Absolutely.
there's quite a high risk there as well. So people go, oh, it's okay, they're going to rescue, they get adopted. They're quite likely to fail because they've probably been put in the rescue for adolescent behaviours. So I think education is key. So whether or not we can start putting out leaflets to vets where people are going to, interact with other professionals, starting to hand out information on social media of what to expect. I think one of the key things as well is letting people know that working breeds particularly have a difficult time with adolescence. Their instinctual behaviours become very, very strong during adolescence. And a lot of people, unfortunately, they want a working breed, that they're not prepared to have a working breed. And I'm one of those people. That's why I've got, as you know, that's why I've got a Shih Tzu. That I knew that, I love working with them, but personality-wise, when I come home, I don't want to work. I want to sit down and watch a movie and chill with my dog. And so I'm like, I need to make sure that I try and get a dog that matches my personality. And we know, unfortunately, people don't go for that. They go for how the dog looks. So they end up with a very energetic, Springer or Collie or German Shepherd. And I know there's a rescue near me, and that some of the breeds are absolutely huge, and people just can't seem to look after them. But I think education is key in rescues. I've been in discussions about how we network with rescues so that we can provide more information for people that do adopt an adolescent, or for people that are considering surrendering, and giving them information to show that this development stage is temporary. But if you
Mhm.
put the work in now, we can help you, reduce these behaviors and hopefully get them, completely eradicated, for want of a better word. So I think education is probably the biggest thing that we need to do, and how we do that is a big, big question. But
Mhm.
starting with talking to veterinary practices, starting to see if we can provide information to rescues. Um, I know it's difficult to have behavioural support for rescues because a lot of them need you to do it for free. Not everyone can give free of the time. But whether or not we can start putting some, is what I was discussing with Joe, is how can we start reaching these people? Can we put some leaflets together that we can market and put out throughout the UK with some basics of the neurological and hormonal changes, what behaviours to expect, the benefits of force-free training, and encouraging people to get help now before it escalates. Because typically people start to see those behaviour changes really kick off at 9 months, and then by 12 months they seem unbearable. for a lot of people. And 12 months, and that time between 9 and 12 months is where the aversive training typically comes in. And then that's when they're usually sort of surrendered to a shelter.
Yeah.
So I think education and finding a way to do that that's going to reach people is going to be so, so crucial.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. I'm finding exactly the same. So that matches in with everything from a rescue side, timeline wise. It's exactly what we're seeing. So yeah, that's sign me up. Put my name down for that for this course that you're writing. I'm in.
You know what? You both hit the nail on the head. This is not something I've ever had a discussion with any other dog trainer with, to be fair. And I've been around a long while. I won't say how long because that gives my age away. But one thing I've noticed over the years, yeah, is round about 9 months of age, a dog is more likely to end up in rescue. Yeah, and then you just sort of like confirmed that for me. The way I've been thinking over the years. So education is key, yes, but does that also mean, and you've both touched on this, that we really need to get that education in, like you said, Holly, from day dot?
Yeah, I think we want to reach people before
Mhm.
those behaviors really kick off because by that point, the relationship can be so damaged. It's very hard to get through to people. There's a really interesting study that I was looking at recently that was looking at the attitudes of people and how they change. And, they sort of measured with questionnaires the words that were used to describe their dog's behavior from sort of 8 weeks to, I think it was 16 weeks, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 24 months, and showing how the attitude changed. And when it was puppy, it was like mischievous, biting, shattered, those, but they kind of expected that behavior, so it was okay. 6 months, the relationship was going really well, and they were like challenging, but part of normal development, part of maturity. And then that sort of 9 to 12 months, there was a little bit of really struggling. This is getting really difficult. At 12 months, the word they described for their dog's behavior was deliberate, intentional bad behavior,
Yeah.
naughty.
Yeah.
So the
Spiteful
attitude
is one
change.
that I get a lot. They're spiteful.
Spiteful, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so you can see that from a puppy, they're like, oh yeah, they're bitey, and we've got these behavior issues, but they're a baby, so I expect it. And for me, it showed that at 12 months of age, that attitude shift shows that they expect their dog to be mature at 12 months. And I think even some vets have this opinion. At 12 months, yeah, they're a year old, they're an adult, we can neuter now. And I'm finding that quite a lot, unfortunately, in some vets. And so that means that the guardian's like, well, you should be not biting now. You should be coming back when called. You should have perfect obedience. And I understand the reasoning behind that. If you've done lots of puppy classes and you've done lots of training, but you're still getting behavior issues. So if we try and get people when their dogs are really young and say, look, at 12 months, not behaviorally mature, probably not going to be behaviorally mature until they're two, and you can expect these behavior fluctuations until that time. I think that takes the pressure off them because they're like, oh, okay, so that we want to change the attitude at 12 months to challenging but not behaviorally mature, so that they know that yes, this isn't easy, but I know to expect it, and this is something that's part of their development. It's not their fault. And I do believe, we say that, oh, we shouldn't clutter people, we shouldn't overwhelm them with information, which I agree with. But I also do give people some credit and I do talk through some of the basics of the neurological changes. So they understand that it's really complex. Even if they don't understand it, I give them a list of some of the things that happen and what it means. This is what it's called. This is what it means for your dog's behavior. So they go, oh, okay, that's why this happens. That's why they're struggling so much. And I say to them every single time they do something that's really difficult that you don't like and it really frustrates you, just picture that brain being under construction and think about how much they're struggling. They don't want to rebel against you. This is just nature priming them for adulthood and they can't help it. And I try and remind them that, when we're teenagers as humans, yes, we've got a concept of right and wrong. We've got a conscience. Our emotional intelligence is much different, is much higher than a dog's. So that although we compare it to a degree, I said dogs have literally got the emotional intelligence of a toddler with all the hormones of a human teenager, and that's not easy for them.
You know what? It comes back again to that word training,
Mm.
where people put too much emphasis on training the dog. And yet, Holly, you've made it quite clear with a lot of clarity that it's a lot deeper than dog training. Yeah, there is a relationship, and then understanding the dog internally. Yeah, not just looking at the dog externally, and start to understand that these changes are going to happen, which they do. Yeah, some are more obvious than others, as we know. Yeah, and some are like, even I pulled my hair out that I don't have. But yeah, you've really hit the nail on the head there, and I think we need to look at ourselves as trainers as well, to actually educate in a slightly different way, but more of the way you've just explained things, yeah, because training isn't going to stop or solve everything. It can't.
No, no, and we can make it more simple for them. So, for example, I say to them the communication between the front of the brain, which is your, rational thoughts, your decision making, your cognitive control, and the communication between that and the emotional center of the brain is not working very well. I said, and unfortunately, the front of the brain, it's going to be rational. It's going to help with your dog's impulse control. It's going to help them listen to you. It's going to help them reflect on training. Is the last part of the brain to mature. I said, so you've got a highly emotional dog with no control system. And then I say to them, it's like having a working engine that can accelerate, you can drive it, but you've got no braking system. And putting it in that terms makes them go, oh, okay. So this is why my dog's so excitable, but I can't get that impulse control. I can't get a stationary behavior. I can't get them to really focus. They're so fixated on everything else but me. And it helps them to visualize why it's so difficult for a dog during this stage to be able to do training. And you're right, training is not really the emphasis. The emphasis needs to be on understanding those behavioral changes, trying to manage some of them so they're not rehearsed. For example, if you've got a dog with really, really poor recall and it's running up to other dogs and it's going to become a risk to itself, which adolescent dogs are at risk of being hit by cars quite a lot. It's quite a big mortality rate for that age. Is making sure that we've got management in place. Having a long line and practicing recall that way is a simple way to manage the behavior so that it's not rehearsed. We can still train and explaining to them that we're helping your dog be successful by not putting them in a scenario where they're likely to fail. And that's not the training failing. That's their brain just not being competent enough to perform the behaviors that you're asking right now. And that can fluctuate day to day, but it's a way to help people to understand, training can be accomplished to a degree, but we're going to be using a lot of management to stop rehearsal of those behaviors so that they don't, grow into them as they, once they pass through that adolescent stage.
Yeah, it's brilliant. You touched on earlier a little bit about neutering. And obviously that's one of the big questions that you get a lot. And again, coming from the rescue side, that's something that is we see the need for the neutering, but we still have a lot of vets advice. My vet, for instance, would advise 6 months for neutering, even now, even with me emailing her some nice little studies to read, 6 months is still her advice for neutering it. What are the sort of the consequences really of behavior wise of the neutering so early on? So if you have a dog and you neuter them at 6 months, what is the fallout from that?
It's so incredibly huge. I've had so many cases where they've neutered so early. And I think from a veterinary point of view and for a rescue point of view, obviously population control is a must. I think that's why now we're trying to advocate for hormone sparing and neutering so that yes, we control the population, but we spare those hormones. For male dogs, removing testosterone creates a massive decline in confidence. Testosterone has been proven to have an anti-anxiety effect. So we can typically see that many males becoming quite reactive. quite anxious. I've seen a lot of females spayed too early, so we're getting a lot of persistent phantom pregnancies because they're so keen to spay. And unfortunately, the only sort of test they've got for that is to just squeeze the nipples. But of course, if we've got dogs having COVID phantom pregnancies, there's going to be no milk production, so it's not really a test whether or not it's the ideal time to spay. But the behavioural consequences are huge. There's so many studies that show that there's an increase in aggression. Aggression is very difficult to quantify in some studies because a lot of the time it's used interchangeably with reactive as well. So barking and lunging at people. Resource guarding is included in that. Aggression towards dogs and people is included in that. But we typically see that aggression is more common in neutered dogs as well. So the behavioural benefits of neutering are outweighed by the risks. So several studies have showed that yes, we might see a decline in scent marking, howling, chewing, and those sorts of behaviours. And so it might be recommended for scent marking, but then I find a lot of people are doing that for stress marking. So they've got a dog that's actually got separation anxiety and they're peeing in the house. So they've neutered for that reason and then gone, oh, they're still peeing. And it's because it wasn't sexual hormones that were driving the behaviour. It was the anxiety they felt. And so those behaviours can often be confused. Chewing, adolescent dogs chew. They have, a second teething stage where they have a renewed interest in chewing. They need it because they're more vulnerable to stress. So they need more stress release. So they're going to chew more. So I find that neutering is used as a quick fix for adolescence, but it doesn't end adolescence. I think actually what it does is amplify issues because now the brain's like, whoa, where do the hormones go? And Dr. I think it's, oh, what's her name now? Dr. Naomi Harvey, who was involved in the study with the adolescent phase conflict behavior. She said that they've now got anecdotal evidence to show that without those hormones, the brain growth is stunted. So we typically see that neutered adolescent dogs have longer legs. Their legs continue to grow, the bones continue to grow. So we get more joint issues. The skulls are smaller, and they look a bit odd. They look gangly and weird, and that can make other dogs more reactive to them because they look weird. It impacts their body language. So then we have them looking more threatening to other dogs, anecdotally. So it has a big impact in canine communication as well. It's got a lot of ramifications. But the fact that it stunts that brain growth makes us think we need more study into how that's going to impact their behavioural development. And I'm not sure there's a way that they can do that ethically, unfortunately. But we know that there's certain regions of the brain that need those hormones. The prefrontal cortex is one of them, which is the thinking rational part of the brain that we need to mature. That needs the hormones to fully mature. And we take those away. And we see dogs that some dogs never reach maturity. I see that in Labrador retrievers quite a lot, where they're neutered at 12 months of age. They develop hip dysplasia and cancers by 3. And they are bouncy, boisterous, jumping up, chewing, and they never seem to get past it. Some of them don't even get past it till around age 6. And by that point, they're reaching their senior years. And so it is having a massive impact. And I think a lot of the guidelines now are saying we've got to stop routine neutering. We've got to do it by a case basis. We need to increase the age that we're going to do it, and we need to consider whether or not it's healthy and safe to do it for this particular breed. I know for female golden retrievers, they've now said not to neuter at any age, because the increase in cancer was 3 to 4 times. So they're now saying golden retrievers keep intact females. That's female golden retrievers their entire life because the risks are so high. And funnily enough, I've had 3 golden retriever cases recently, all with very, very aggressive cancers, and they're only 3 years of age. So obviously the risks to behaviour and health are going to differ according to the age it's done and the breed, because the genetics are just so different. But there is definitely a significant behavioural risk. And it's one of the questions I get asked the most when I've got an adolescent case. Should we neuter? We've been told it make the dog calmer. And I hear it every day, and it drives me bonkers because I have to explain to them puberty and adolescence are separate. adolescence is necessary. That's what the emphasis is. I know it's challenging, but it's necessary. You've got to go through it. You can't just fix it. You can't just, remove it and just hope it's going to go away. There's no magic pill. They've got to get through it. And it's safer for you to wait to nurture. Because obviously, if we've got a pain element and we create joint issues, that's going to affect behavior. We're going to have dogs with arthritis and hip dysplasia that can become aggressive, don't get diagnosed, bite someone, are euthanized, game over. Same with persistent phantom pregnancies. The amount of dogs that have probably been euthanized for aggression because they were spayed during the distress stage is probably huge. And vets are calling it the silent killer because all females have phantom pregnancies, but not everyone knows that. So when the dog is suddenly aggressive after spay, and it can occur months to years after, they're not necessarily going to associate that with that spay. And so when they're aggressive and they bite the child, obviously it's game over. So it's a really complex conversation. It's something that I've included in my course, the Canine Principles course, as well as the implant as well, because it is so often recommended by vets. And I think dog professionals need to understand the ramifications of it because there's still that, it's just almost on repeat of, yeah, it'll probably calm them down. So let's just do it and then see what happens. And even with the implants, again, you're removing testosterone for the males and their brains need the testosterone to fully develop.
Mhm.
So even if we see an improvement in behavior with the implant, we could be getting false results because the brain hasn't developed yet. We don't quite know. We know that the neurological changes and the hormonal changes fluctuate. And so we could get an improvement with the implant and go, yeah, well, let's neuter. And then neuter them at 18 months, 2 years, and find they're an anxious wreck because
Mhm.
we tested it during a very, very unstable time. So it's a big conversation. I'd love to do a whole talk on it, actually.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
So while we're in that sort of part of the adolescence talk, would it be much different for smaller breeds as it would be or is for large breeds? The changes, do they come around at the same time, or does one size mature quicker than the other? Well,
So smaller breeds typically do mature faster. However, I do still think that from what I've experienced with my own case is that still waiting to after 2 years of age to neuter, if you're going to neuter, is still ideal because I think it's so hard to pinpoint behavioral development. I think dogs are so individual. They've got their own personalities and they struggle with different things. And I think a lot of people still believe that even a small toy breed or a companion breed like my own is going to mature at 12 months. And I can confidently say with my Mando that I didn't see his behavior really settle until 3 years of age, even though he's a small breed. And so I still think, anecdotally, there could be some dogs, smaller dogs, that do still take, quite long to mature and settle in themselves. But yes, typically, on paper, smaller breeds would mature faster. But I still think we're talking 18 months at least for behavioural development, for the brain to fully develop, to be sure that they're fully past the adolescent stage.
love that because it's very important that we note the individual, take look at only the individual. Don't worry about the breed as such, because every dog is so different. But I have taken away, and you've confirmed for me that my way of thinking is okay and it's good, so I'm going to stick with it. Relationship building is hugely important, yeah, from day dots. Um, us being able to be there and support, be kind, and have that compassion when it's needed. Now, that sounds strange coming from a big guy, but that's me. Yeah, that's just it's in my DNA. Because I think why I've been so lucky, let me just touch wood, lucky-ish around that stage. Yes, my dog's gone through it, especially the males. Yeah, you can see it 100%. But I think if I hadn't built that bonding, loving relationship, it would have been worse. Yeah. But I'm a strong believer in relationships. So although we didn't sort of like you've touched on it, and I think we're in agreement that relationship is a must. Yeah. Definitely not neutering or spaying our dogs just for the sake of a certain behaviour. Doesn't make sense. But that to this day will always make me mad when vets are taking people's money, because in my opinion that's all they're doing, is taking the money. Holly, how do we educate them? How do we really go to the vets and start to educate them? And that's a big answer, so you don't really have to answer. And then I look at the adolescent stage. How do we also get them to look at dogs, as individuals, their needs?
It's really difficult. One of the things I did recently for a client was I sent her, I'm trying to think what it's called now. There was a study done, I think it's 35 breeds, and it's got a big table on it with the ideal age to neuter spay, according to breed, female and male. And I know that my client took this to her vet after they recommended her dog to be spayed, and it was actually a female golden retriever. So she took that in. And obviously they're talking about the risks of pyometra and everything, but the risk of cancer was just so high. And it's so common that when she realized that, she took it into her vet, and the vet's actually put it on the wall on the notice board. So that made a big difference. The only issue with that study is it's only for physical health, not behavioral. So they might say, oh, from 6 months physically or from 8 months physically, yes, we can do it. It doesn't include behavior. So it's good from a health perspective. If you've got any dogs that need longer, it's a really good study for vets to have on the wall so that, vets can go down the list and look at the recommendation according to that study. Behavior wise, this is something I've been considering for a while, whether or not I try and go into vets and say, hey, can we have some sort of webinar, or are you happy for me to have a discussion with you? I'm a little bit nervous to do it because I'm not actually a clinical animal behaviorist yet. It's something that I'm working towards. But I think that is something that we should start doing. Saying, hey, is there a day that we can have like a CPD day, and sit and I'll do a presentation and we can discuss your concerns, my concerns, what the research says, what the guidelines are, see if I can give some case studies so that we can start having that interchange, because they don't get to see a big picture of their dog's behavior. So unless we write behavior assessments for dogs, they don't get all the information from their guardian. It's just a fact. They only get a small window. And I think I had a vet contact me recently for a behavior case. They referred the case to me and they said, we don't know what to do. And I was actually quite pleased because I thought, well, at least you're being honest about it and you're not just trying to fix it away. Now they have said, oh, we could try neutering. And I'm like, it's a very, very reactive collie, just literally come out of rescue, doesn't need a traumatic surgery on his hands right now. Don't know what his history is, unfortunately, don't know his bite history, don't know if there's aggression there. I can't see aggression right now. I think he's got great potential, but it's very early days. And I said, I think we need to wait because we haven't even got an accurate idea of how old he is. He could be 1, he could be 1.5, he could be 2. They're very unsure of whereabouts he is in his development. He looks gangly, so to me, he still looks like an adolescent. So we've had a discussion that way where I've said, oh, I haven't recommended this for this reason because of the behaviours we're working on. Because unfortunately, when vets neuter, it's like, there you go, problems, and that's it then. Once the dog's got issues, it's like, do we try anti-anxiety medication? But then they don't want to do the behavioural modification alongside that because of the cost. So the dog ends up in a rescue. And it's just the vets are hands off now. It's like, I've neutered him, it's back to you again. And the solutions can be, unless you've got a veterinary behaviourist on board, the solutions can be very, very limited. So again, trying to see if we can network with vets, seeing whether or not we can have an interchange, whether we can have a day where we do CPD, whether we can discuss, would be ideal to try and start changing the way they see things. I think so many don't trust guardians to control the population, but I don't know whether Samantha agrees. Majority of dogs that are bred intentionally. Very few litters are accidental. And obviously that skyrocketed during lockdown, where we've got the most bizarre breeds that we've ever seen, bizarre crosses, and they're making a lot of money. And so I don't think and that we can see that in places like Norway, where neutering is actually against the law unless medically necessary, and they don't have issues with population. So obviously, it's not the answer. We've got to revise it and go. It seems like to make sense that, oh, if we neuter, they can't procreate. But if we've got loads of behaviour issues afterwards and end up being euthanized, and then we're creating another puppy to replace that dog, we're not actually creating a solution, we're just in a vicious circle.
Massive vicious circle. And thanks for the Norway. I hadn't didn't know that. They say we learn something new every day, and today I've learned about Norway. Um, Holly, I just want to say thank you because I've learned a lot just listening to you. Some things I already knew, some things I didn't know. Yeah, wasn't aware of, and you've now brought that to my attention. So again, I'm going to be looking how can I now have an impact on the teenage years of the dogs that we work with. I just want to say thank you for coming along today because it's been very informative and I always knew you knew your stuff. How do people find you if they would like to work with you?
So my website is porchores.com. My Facebook is @porchores. And I've got my Facebook group that you're in, which is the Dog Dilemmas Positive Training and Support. And that's a free group that I created with Jay Gurdon, both for dog professionals and guardians, so that we've got somewhere where we can ask questions and no judgment. I have put a long list of files on there on neutering, so one for health, one for behaviour. And I've created a few different PDFs with lists of articles and studies because what I hear all the time from people is I want to find training information and I want to do my own research, but there's so many mixed messages and I don't know what's right and what's wrong. And so I thought I'm going to try and see if I can create a resource where people can trust the information that's in the guides. So that's a good place to find me. I'm in there quite a bit. And we obviously have our own events once a month, discussing different behaviour issues. We did an adolescence one with Ros Pooley, from the Mutti Professor. We're doing separation anxiety this month. So that's a good place to find me. But yeah, I'm in Canine Principles as well on ISCP. So if we've got students watching, I'm also in there in those Facebook groups as well. So yeah, you can find me in a few places.
And going back to the group, I can't remember what it's called.
Dog Dilemmas.
Yeah, yeah, that group. Go and join a fantastic Facebook group. Lots and lots of stuff to learn within it, and regardless of where we're at in our journey. So I just want to say once again, Holly, thank you for coming along today to join us here at Dogs Do Speak. I think you are definitely going to come back. If not, I shall drive to wherever you live and drag you back. Your stuff, and it's been highly enjoyable. So it's going to be goodbyes from myself, Connie Spence, and a goodbye from Samantha Whalen. Until the next time, goodbye.